B.F. Skinner about behaviorism, chapter summary for chapter 13, What is Inside the Skin. A person lives, is made up of genetic characteristics, acquires a history of learned experiences from interacting with its environment. Every behavior is determined by the current environment and that personal history. This contrasts to the mentalistic view, where behavior is driven by talents, emotions, instincts, and numerous other concepts, including free will to behave free from any influence other than one's logic and intuition. The chapter then proceeds to argue which viewpoint is most likely correct, according to mentalist speak, or useful to the behaviorist. While behaviorism requires more language to describe behavior, it also follows patterns and can usually, but not always, be predictable. Conclusion, a draw between behaviorism and mentalism. Use and control. Mentalistic concepts cannot be modified for experiments. For example, you cannot directly change the level of courage, faith, or loyalty a subject has. You can affect the physical body, but you cannot alter characteristics of a mentalistic mind. However, changing the environment, even the addition or subtraction of a single stimulus, can produce observable changes in behavior. For use and prediction, looks like a minor victory for behaviorism, or possibly another draw. Mentalistic concepts such as feelings, intelligence, or emotions can seem to predict behavior because these concepts are frequently linked to specific behaviors. Someone considered intelligent is more likely to exhibit more useful or productive behaviors for himself or others. However, if the behaviorist has more knowledge of a person's history of stimuli, behaviors, consequences, and the current environment, the behaviorist can make more accurate predictions. Use in interpretation. Here Skinner talks about what the two schools of thought do when neither have much background knowledge to go on while observing behavior. He wrote, "It is more helpful to guess about genetic endowment and environmental history than about the feelings which have resulted from them." I think Skinner's logic falters a little. He is right that to a behaviorist, guessing the behavior is more useful, but as the mentalist has comparable powers of prediction, he'd be better off at guessing at the emotions that drive behavior. Skinner considers this a behaviorist point, but I think it's a draw. How far back? Mentalism cannot trace causes and effects in events very far to find meaning. If someone does something because they are hot-tempered, then if you ask, why is he hot-tempered, you may get answers like genetics or he was raised that way. You cannot ask why for much longer before the answer becomes, that is just the way he is. For behaviorists, they can investigate traits of stimuli, behaviors, and consequences merging together, and can go back as far as they continue to find useful variables they can control and test. Victory point for behaviorism. Relation to other sciences. Which forms a better dialogue between social and natural sciences? Behavioral science used to be closely linked with early psychology and required new concepts to be invented to explain behavior. Behaviorists could explain behavior with more physiological stimuli while also recognizing stimuli under the skin. Is a choice even necessary? Skinner now looks at, there may be no battle between the philosophies. Perhaps you can believe in a mental world and a physical world. Skinner sees a challenge in determining how mental effects affect physical and vice versa. He further argues that if a mental life free from the constraints of interacting with the physical world, it would be so satisfactory that the mental state would have no reason to interact with the physical. Psychology would be the study of subjective ideas, not observable behavior, not a science, and therefore would have no reason to be. Skinner's logic is persuasive, but not ironclad. To play devil's advocate, there are a number of disciplines that are not scientific but still benefit humanity. I would argue that literature, philosophy, and non-scientific psychology are all used with purpose and have reason for being. For behaviorists, the answer is simple. Make no distinction between mental and physical states of organisms. This accepts that events otherwise attributed to mental states are harder but not impossible to observe. What clinches the argument for behaviorism over mentalism is that despite being much younger than mentalistic ideals, is proven to be far more effective at understanding and helping modify behavior. This argument being resolved, Skinner goes on to discuss physiology. He provides many examples of common language that use physical aspects of the body to describe behavior. These statements carry the weight of a diagnosis, and when that weight is unsubstantiated. If I am in a state of amazement, it's because my mind is blown, yet no wind has touched my mind if my mind was something that could ever be found in my body. In a way, these mentalistic constructs are understandable. Skinner describes how the effects of a nervous system could only be guessed at until nerves were actually discovered. Those guesses became mentalistic language. They are also flawed because understanding the nervous system may explain that signals come from the brain to trigger actions in individual tissue, but it's not explained why when those actions manifest as behaviors. He mentions that there is a quest among researchers to discover the intricacies of the body that will then unlock the mystery of behavior. This quest causes them to overlook that behaviorism is alive, well, and already working. He says that advances in physiology, which might extinguish mentalistic concepts, would fill in the blank of behavioral knowledge. In mind or nervous systems, Skinner postulates the introspective viewpoint that a person can observe and report their own reasons for behavior. This requires an inner consciousness separate from other more mundane mental functioning. He then explains that there is no anatomical place in the body for the inner eye to observe and report. Self-awareness is a recent evolutionary phenomenon, and not enough time has passed for its own body parts to form. He concludes by saying the body is only capable of observing stimuli and remembering behaviors and consequences. There are no organs sufficient to create behavioral self-control. In wrapping up the chapter, he mentions the possibility of this conceptual nervous system, which would have the ability to go beyond human physiology and be used to develop artificial intelligence. The system would allow a difference between the physical and mental states of being. It would exist as a model waiting to be proved by physiology. He concludes this would not likely be happen and not much use as a psychological construct. At best, it produces metaphors to describe behavior, but lacking a link to physical processes makes it nearly useless. Discussion question. Setting aside your career intentions regarding applied behavior analysis, do you find his arguments persuasive? Which ones would you disagree with?